Hello, this is Hannah Sable. I'm in Farmington Hills, Michigan. The date is August 1st, 2016, and I am sitting down with Joni Mortier and Carol King for the Detroit 67 Oral History Project. Thank you both for sitting down with me today.
It's a pleasure.
Carol, can you start by telling me where and when you were born?
Yes, I was born in Detroit in 1942.
Okay. And Joni, when were you born?
I was born in 1953, also in Detroit.
Okay. And what neighborhood did you grow up in?
Northwest Detroit, that would be the 7 Mile Grand River Telegraph area.
Okay. And was that neighborhood integrated?
No, it was not.
Okay. So moving into the 60s, did either of you notice any tensions in the city at all?
I did not.
I did not either.
Okay. And how old were you both in 67?
Let's see, I was born 42, so that would put me 27.
Okay.
And I would have been 14.
Okay. And had you moved out of your mother's house at this point?
I had gotten married by that time and was living in Royal Oak with
Okay.
my husband.
Okay. And Joni, you were still living at home with your mother, correct?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So we'll start with you, Carol. How did you first hear about the riots?
I was in Europe traveling with my husband and pregnant with our very first child, and I heard in Europe, we were in England, and we heard in the news, international news, that there were important riots going on in Detroit, Michigan, in the United States. And they happened to mention a street which was very close to where I grew up, where I used to ride bikes, etc. And so I was shocked and made my very first international phone call, which was a big deal at that time. And reached my family, I believe, immediately, and they assured me no, nothing was going on whatever street it was that I had mentioned. They had not heard of anything.
Okay. So you were worried before you contacted them?
Absolutely. Yes.
And then you felt better after speaking to them, or were you still worried?
I was, I think I was actually continued to be worried because the name of the street was still so close to the family. What did newscasters know that I didn't know, that my family might not know? So I listened in an ongoing way carefully.
And when you returned to Europe, did you drive through the city at all, like on your way back from the airport, or?
No, we did not do that. We probably went straight home, but we were in Royal Oak, so that was pretty close to the city of Detroit.
Did you see any changes upon your return?
No, did not.
Okay. All right, Joni, moving to you now, how did you hear about the riots the first time?
I don't know.
Okay.
I assume just talk within the family. Of course, my first memory of the action was my mother looking for some excitement, I guess. Or again, curiosity. Taking us in the car. I remember it as being myself and my girlfriend from next door, and maybe a third person. But again, driving down, I don't know what location, whatever Mom said is
By the boulevard or
probably it.
Woodward?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Was there anything else that you remembered from that week? Anything you witnessed or heard about?
I do remember hearing that there were, and it's almost embarrassing to say this, but I remember hearing that black people were marching down Grand River, and they were approaching Grand River and Lasher, which is close to where we live. That's the old Redford area. I remember hearing that. I don't remember being really scared. I remember wondering what we would do if they came to our neighborhood. But we grew up in a situation where my father had a very good friend who was a black man.
Mm-hmm.
And so we kind of always, as kids, had exposure, you know,
Completely favorable friendship
Mm-hmm.
exposure.
Okay.
Yeah, so I think we, you know, someone who didn't have that might have reacted
Mm-hmm.
with more fear, but,
As a teenager, did you have any idea what was going on?
not that I recall.
Okay.
Probably nothing I would understand.
Mm-hmm. All right. How have you seen the city change over the past 50 years?
Oh, well, I can speak to that
Mhm.
because we used to enjoy driving in the Detroit area, and I was a member of the Women's City Club and spent lots of time down there.
Mm-hmm.
And I saw a lot of deterioration go on, and particularly the buildings. And yes, and then I would see further deterioration of the lives of people, lots of street life,
Mm-hmm.
and it was very sad change
Mm-hmm.
because Detroit had always been just a great city to grow up in,
Mm-hmm.
and I always felt quite safe.
Did that change after the riots? Did you not feel safe?
Well,
or-
I think yes, there you needed to be careful. It was just common sense carefulness.
Mm-hmm.
For instance, if my car broke down on Woodward, because I'm driving up from Royal Oak, remember,
Mhm.
from where we were living, that I would have to be cautious. That's all, just common sense
Mm-hmm.
caution.
Did you notice any changes, Joni?
Well, certainly in the city.
Mhm.
I still live in the same house I grew up in.
Mm-hmm.
So certainly I saw a lot of deterioration. You know, when I remember tension is more when the whole idea of busing came up in the city. That's when I remember more tension. And, you know, at that point I did have black friends in high school, and you know, so there was, they didn't like the idea, you know, we kind of, as friends of them, were backing them. Anyhow, so that's where I remember more tension.
Mm-hmm.
But certainly, you know, again, the deterioration that happened in Detroit, and, you know, and now kind of watching the revitalization, depending on what neighborhood you're in.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, I mean, I live in a fully integrated neighborhood, and certainly when I was down at Wayne University, I learned to be cautious, but it wasn't a racial thing.
Mm-hmm.
That was more just a crime thing. And there were rapes happening down at Wayne when I was down there, you know, so certainly the city changed. Obviously, the
Mhm.
city changed. I don't recall friends of mine whose parents kind of picked them up and left the city, the whole white flight thing. My husband remembers that. He had two friends who, like, within a year, you know, their parents moved
Mm-hmm.
into the suburbs. I don't recall that. But, you know, and I guess I watched a show on the Detroit riots, and I guess I had no clue, obviously at 14, how huge this was, how significant it was,
Mm-hmm.
and, you know, kind of the boiling point.
All right. Final question. Where do you see the city headed?
Well, I am extremely optimistic.
Yeah.
I am
Yeah.
too.
Mhm.
I really am.
Mhm.
I'm seeing, for instance, we've been down at the Riverwalk. What an integration of cultures. And they are all down there just enjoying life with their families. We all have that wonderful commonality. We're all laughing at silly stuff and admiring the beauty of the day. It just brings out the we're all people thing,
Mhm.
and that is feeding into the fact that there are commercial things that are going on that I think are good. My husband and I live in Lexington, Michigan, north of Mortier, and we have never a problem about going down to some activity in the Detroit area. In fact, we lived in Grosse Pointe for a while. So we are high on Detroit, and we have lots of optimism
That's great.
that young people like me can get on a bus and go shopping downtown. Probably not yet, but one day that there will be that kind of commercial business and attraction down there.
Yeah, and I think for me, I'm active in the community, and I know a lot of community activists and a lot of people who are really kind of digging in their heels and moving into the city and, all the opportunities the city has to kind of have a new beginning and get really creative. So I am just seeing all these incredible creative people who, they can't help it but make this city really incredible, And our house, who I don't know what my mother bought it, or my grandmother bought it for when she bought it, but, it's gone as low as worth $18,000 according to the SCV, and I wouldn't be surprised if it'll be $1 million someday, just because the city's going to be so great.
Yeah.
May I offer one thing, and you haven't asked me for this,
please.
so if you want to click that off.
Oh, well, I was just about to ask if there's anything else you guys wanted to
Okay,
share.
All right. Joni mentioned that our family brought us up to really regard people in, I think, a really great way. Yes, skin color was different, but let me give you an idea of, I think, a great example of how we were raised up and how our attitudes were formed. We lived on Berg Road, that was mentioned. Now, you're much too young to know this, but you might have heard about an amusement park called Edgewater that was at Berg Road and 7 Mile. That was a fun place to go and a huge attraction. Well, lots of black kids knew about that fun place, and they would take a bus and down Grand River. This is how I knew about it. And then they would walk down across Berg Road to get over to 7 Mile. Is that about 3/4 of a mile, maybe, something like that?
Probably.
Yeah. Well, I remember so many rainstorms, and it would catch these kids, black kids and white kids, and we would call them up on our porch. We had a great big, lovely, wonderful porch with a big protective roof overhang. And these kids were so grateful to be called up. And we would just laugh and carry on until the rain went by. There was never a sense of fear or because their skins were a different color that we don't do things like this. It was just they got caught in the rain. Come on up here until the rain passes by. And I just remember such a great joy, and they were so appreciative. So Just my story.
That's great. Is there anything else either of you wanted to add?
I have something to add.
Okay, Frances?
It was the recession of 2008 that brought down the city. It certainly wasn't those black riots. Do either of you agree with me about that?
Well, I think it happened sooner than that, Mom, because again, as I traveled from Royal Oak down to the Women's City Club, that's when I saw a lot of Detroit and watched the deterioration. And that would be, you know, in the late, Craig was born in '68, so that would be early '70s, etc.
All right, there was what they call the white flight, wasn't there?
Mm-hmm.
And that would contribute to the deterioration.
Yes.
I forgot about that.
And there was a lot of racism in Detroit. You know, my experience,
Yeah.
there was.
There was.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't see
Yeah,
it.
and you know, like, again, my husband talked about, you know, people, again, his two friends that kind of moved off the block after the riots because of the riots, and you know, this kind of racial fear, and both of those people sold to black families, and my husband can remember those black families having a problem because they were, you know, I mean, the city was starting to integrate more, and there being real problems in that respect. You know, so I think that after the riots, there was, like you say, this, you know, that was part of the white flight that went on, and the racism that abounded.
I'm sure the recession of 2008 that your mother mentioned didn't help.
It did not help. That's, you know, a lot of people losing their homes, which has really created a huge problem. You're right, Mom. Yeah.
Oh, that recession just ruined half of Old Redford.
Yeah, you're
It's-
probably right.
It's the most blighted area you ever did see. You should go over and look at it.
Yeah. It's full of good memories, all of our growing up lives.
All right. Well, thank you ladies so much for sitting down with me today. We appreciate it.
Thank you.